Hallelujah is a first of its kind 1929 musical drama directed by King Vidor. First of its kind because it was the first all-black cast film by a major studio. The story follows Zeke, a sharecropper turned preacher whose life takes a tumultuous turn when he falls for a seductive city woman, leading to a downward spiral of temptation and redemption. With its dynamic blend of music, dance, and drama, Hallelujah explores themes of faith, love, and the struggle between worldly desires and spiritual salvation. Vidor's film broke barriers in Hollywood, showcasing the talent and depth of African-American performers at a time when racial representation in cinema was rare. King Vidor himself was white. His cast was all black. The year was 1929, and this is Hallelujah.
I seem to roam through a field that is snowy white, and through the silent night, a banjo is playing. It says, "Come back, a man is hot, and the cabin door will be open at the end of the Hello there, fellas. Hey, baby. You sure can sing good, fellas.
Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Release date, August 20th, 1929. Will and I sat down and watched the first all-African-American talkie that came out in August 20th of 1929. The story is a sharecropper decides to become a preacher after falling for a vamp from the city. Directed by King Vidor, distributed by MGM, which, by the way, we got to see the early days of the emblem and the logo, just the kind of title plate that MGM starts off with. That was pretty cool to see. And then the runtime in this movie is 1 hour and 40 minutes. Will, welcome to the show, buddy. Love having you. We've been talking 1929 movies for the past 3 or 4 films. We're back now from the Oscars. Oscars are behind us for the 2023 plate. Let's talk Hallelujah. Let's get to the attraction part of it. Your overall instant reaction and overall entertainment value for this movie that we just watched.
Yeah, so I mean, entertainment value is kind of a roller coaster, right? Because there's some really low lows in this movie where there's not a lot going on and it feels a little slow. But then there's also some really great scenes in this movie too. So it's kind of a roller coaster on this one, but overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I think there's some very interesting themes going on here. I think one of the things that we keep coming back to is this word messy. Like things are messy right around this time. It feels like there's a lot of good ideas, but not quite knowing how to put it all together yet. That's kind of how I felt about Hallelujah today.
See, I was actually pleasantly surprised, right? I found myself intrigued throughout the whole thing. So my entertainment value was, I don't want to say it was it was all rise as Barty Stinson believes playlist should be, or party playlist. But I found myself intrigued from the jump to the very end. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, here I am thinking, okay, what type of production value is an all African-American cast going to get, right? Maybe I had some prejudices already built into what I thought I was going to see. And there were some moments early on where I thought, oh boy, maybe we are headed in for a long 1 hour and 40 minutes. But when you got the story, and if I'm being honest with you, when you talk about like Daniel Haynes, the guy that plays Zeke, there's things that help this story move along, and he's one of them, right? He's got that big, deep voice. Yep. And we'll get to him when we talk about characters here in a little bit. But just as far as instant reaction, I was like, wow, who's this guy? Right away. I was like, man, maybe I'll learn to want to watch some more films that he was in. So that's just my initial reaction with the story. I was pleasantly surprised. I found myself attached and intrigued the whole way. Even in the spots, like you said, there are messy spots. But I also found that because it is a musical, I also found that the musical in the songs in this one felt like it had more meaning, right? It carried more impact on the film. The whole soundtrack does, right? comparing it to like Harry Beaumont's, the Broadway Melody, which was perfect for what that movie served. I just felt like we've got we got some an emotional complex film here, with some
Yeah.
layers where we don't get that with the Broadway Melody. So to me, the musical portion of it too felt like it carried a little bit further and was a little bit more meaningful. So your thoughts
Yeah.
on that? Did you feel the same way when it came to the music?
Yeah, no, I think the music was it was really well done. I'm interested too in that kind of that I said messy, not necessarily here as like a critique either. More like I think there's some good ideas going on, but they don't all the way fit together. I I'm probably going to be researching King Vidor and kind of his techniques a little bit more because I thought some of the filmmaking stuff he was doing too, with his camera and the lighting was just phenomenal. So yeah, I really think that he was using the full package to give us a film here. It wasn't just him trying to tell a story through his characters. It wasn't just him having good sound, but everything was kind of fitting together really well. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you're right. And I don't want to kind of, get there too quick because we are going to talk about direction. And we're kind of changing up the format and how we do this show a little bit to see if we can't find a more, more comfortable transition through the podcast. But what I think is that there were some shots in this movie, Will, specifically towards the end, like just
yeah,
the swamp chase scene alone. I was like, wow, I can't imagine how they were pulling off the lighting in that, especially for a black and white movie, an all black cast,
yeah,
and people will tell you that will play an impact on how it shows up on the camera. Um, there was, I was enthralled. I was literally sitting there going, what is going to happen here? How is this going to play out? And like, what type of, lighting is going to be necessary. And it almost felt like it was just natural moonlighting. You know what I mean? It was just very
mm,
well done. The shots, and that's just like the lighting portion of it, and we'll get to that in a little bit later, but you're right. I definitely think King, Vidor or Vidor, he really, at times really painted the picture that we needed to see it with vivid colors for a black and white film, if that's a way to say that. So, a
yeah.
couple things to note. Oh, sorry. Did you want to add on?
Nope, you're good.
Nope. I just wanted to do a couple things to note before we jump on the plot. This is, like I said, the first all African American cast, okay, and talking movie. Had an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, Will, and it's got a 3.3% or 3.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Yeah,
We'll get to our ratings and final thoughts a little bit later, but King Vidor was able, when he came to America to kind of get this movie or a movie, an all African American cast movie made, he had some trouble, right? He definitely had some trouble in his homeland, brought it to the United States, decided that he was going to meet with a gentleman named Nicholas Shank. Now, here tells you a little bit about the time frame. All right, the era in which they lived in. So when Vidor presented this to the president of MGM at the time to get this movie made, he had to frame the movie by saying he's depicting an African American sexual deviance. Right? He basically had to say that I'm going to showcase African Americans in a negative light in order to get an all African American cast.
yeah,
All while getting the green light, he still felt like he was doing them justice by hiring an all black cast, by having black behind the film or behind the line filmmakers with him, and just kind of telling the story that is the culture of the African American community at that time.
yeah.
Just speak on maybe that, just the nature of the time. And I mean, we've talked in the past and continue to
Yeah.
do so as we go forward, but just speak on that if you can.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things I was kind of looking at with some of his background today because I was curious a little bit about how like um, I always have some questions whenever there's a white person kind of telling a story about blackness, right? because you can have the best of intentions, you could have the worst of intentions, but you should always, I think people should be allowed to tell those stories if they feel like they have a thing to say about it. And I think this actually has a little bit more to say than just him trying to put black culture in some sort of like bad light here. I think he's trying to say something about humanness, right? Because I was reading a little bit about him too, and he was raised religious, and he was wrote for Christian Scientism as he was growing up, like his own one of the magazines for his church. So I think he's trying to use blackness to kind of draw a parallel to not just white culture, but to religion here. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. And yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's probably not the right word here, but it's unfortunate. That's what it took, was for him to tell a story, was for him to, come out and say, hey, this is going to be a story that puts black culture in a bad light. And that's how he gets it greenlit.
Yeah, the quote by Schneck was, "Well, if you think like that, I'll let you make a picture about horrors." I mean, it was very graphic. That was the quote that is given. But I do think, and maybe this is just me not knowing. It would be interesting to talk to some of our black friends about this. At least maybe some that have done some studies on this, or anybody that's a historian on African American culture. But to me, it did feel like a movie about African American culture. And maybe I don't know, but like it felt to me like I was kind of looking for the moments of whitewashing, that term whitewashing, to kind of see if someone was going to kind of present themselves as more quote unquote white versus black type thing. And I'm not sure that we necessarily got that. At least it didn't jump off the page to me. I know we're maybe he couldn't show too much good in an African American community, because maybe ultimately it doesn't get greenlit and see the distribution that he wants. So maybe there is some politics there. But did you feel like there was any type of quote unquote whitewashing happening during this film? Because I didn't see too much of it. At least it wasn't too obvious or overt. Hi guys, Robert Gifford. I'm one of the co-hosts of Cinema 100 podcast. Will and I would like to take this moment to simply just say thank you for listening to our little show. We also want to say thank you to the hundreds of followers that have been following us on Instagram and TikTok. If you haven't been following us and would like to know how, you can go to Instagram, TikTok, or Gmail and follow us at Cinema 100 Podcast. If you've been listening to us on YouTube and you'd like to listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, you can go to Cinema 100. And finally, if you want to get all of our latest reviews and ratings on the shows and movies that we've watched, you can go to Letterboxd and you can type in cinema_100. Finally, we'd like to do something a little different this season. We want your participation. How can you do that? Well, simply you go to cinema100podcast@gmail.com and you can type in the subheading anything 100. This is your chance to ask Will or myself any questions in regards to old cinema, new cinema, what our favorite actors are, who our favorite directors are, movies we hated, Christmas movies. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Is it not? Anything that you can think of. Or maybe you just want to give us your review of the last movie that we watched, or maybe you just simply want to tell us where you're listening from. Either way, we'll take your questions at the end of every show, and we hope to do this going forward. Finally, we hope you guys enjoyed today's show, and constantly, from the bottom of our hearts, we want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to the show. This is Cinema 100.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I guess I took some of the religious kind of undertones that were occurring to be I definitely think he's trying to say something about like black religion and black culture, but I also think that it translates enough for him to feel like he's justified in putting this on film to tell a story about not just about black culture. I think he's trying to say something a little bit bigger. I may be wrong. I may be trying to give him too much credit here, but it felt like there's ways where we can look at, other types of religion that aren't, Southern religion in general, that has the speaking in tongues and the theatrics of feeling like you've been possessed in church by the Spirit of God. And I just think there's stuff there that we can translate, not just, into we can translate it to all religion. But
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is just and we'll talk about it in themes, but to me, this is a movie about religion through the eyes of of a black man and a black culture, and what religion can do, and how it can either transcend you or defeat you. So yeah, to me, this is a movie. So like, I think you are giving it the appropriate amount of credit. That's at least the way I took it, and the 998 others that watched it on Letterboxd. So let's get to the plot. We're going to try some new things. Instead of going scene by scene, we're going to kind of go, plot point by plot point as far as what's important to the movie. I do like to kind of give credit to first shot and last shot. I just always interesting how we kind of bookend stories. So the first shot of this movie, Will, is, I typed in what I just assumed was slaves in field picking cotton, right? I wouldn't assume anybody would be volunteering their time down there. But so slaves in the field picking cotton. Zeke talks with his mammy and all the kids about what he's going to buy from the town. So right away we get this kind of wide shot of not just Zeke and his family, but kind of all of the families that are working together to pick this cotton field.
I do think this is supposed to be after the Civil War, though. I think it's supposed to be kind of.
Oh, you're right.
Day.
There was a car in this movie. You're right. So this is okay. So maybe this is just their way of making money.
Yeah, no, I think it's supposed to kind of identify like what black families kind of took over, once they had opportunities to make some decisions. So
nope, you're 100% right. I've just crossed that out. You're 100% right. Just my original thought when I seen it connected with that, and then you're right. There was it's probably taking place in 1914, 1915, somewhere around there. Hell, it might even be 1920. Who knows? So that was the first shot of the movie. Now let's kind of talk about the Act 1 plot, right? So essentially what's taking place in this movie is we follow this young man. You want to put an age on him, say mid-20s, late 20s?
Yeah, if you're talking about Zeke, then yeah, probably I think you're right.
Yeah, we start off originally, we're following the family, but the story really is from the perspective of Zeke, right? And Zeke is the older brother and first son of what we believe Mammy and Papa to have had. And when you're looking at like what his journey is, basically what ends up happening, especially in Act 1, is you have him representing the good, right? We start the movie off with him being a great example of an older brother, a great example of a first son, constantly doing right by his parents, helping out, presenting the good of this community, the good of human being. Fair to say that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole first act here is all about like family and God. And they're shot a lot in the light here, so there's like some value claims being made in the first act about like about family and togetherness and communal like gatherings and so I definitely think that's it.
Yeah, and some of the exposition and contrast, like this family, you're right. This is probably 100 years ago, this family, 1920s, 1915s. There was some education there, right? So like Missy Rose, who they claim to be the adopted sister in this movie, she's able to play the piano. Spunk is able to read the Bible. There is some education there, even though there's still some of that, African-American, vocabulary and language, the way that they spoke back in the day. When you look at Zeke, he is a force. He does communicate well, right? And then what I think they did a really good job was maybe the separation between Mammy and Papa and the way they spoke, because I think there was a distinct separation between the two. But as far as plot goes, we kind of get to an idea right away, early Act 1, that there's something going on with Zeke. And for lack of better words, I mean, you can paint a label on it. It comes off when we talk about sexual deviance. Zeke's.
Yeah,
I'm starting to feel like we've got a horny man on our hands here, ladies and gentlemen. Right?
definitely.
Adam and Eve show up. They're just townspeople they have 11 children. They want to get married. And then during this scene is when we kind of get Missy Rose, who's playing the piano. Zeke kind of sneaks into the house, and he attempts to steal a kiss from her,
Right.
because he's got temptations. He's a grown man who doesn't have a lot of opportunity, I'm assuming. And he'll take these temptations anywhere he can get them. So this is kind of like the first idea that maybe he's not as quote unquote good as we believe. He's someone who is being faced with the devil and the temptations that the devil present to us humans. So far, what do you think? Where you at with this?
Exactly right. I don't have much to add. I think that sexual deviancy is the right word, phrase. I think he's battling temptations, and I think as the film goes on through this first act, we kind of come up against the idea of sin, right? So just sin in general, because we not just sex, we've got some gambling problems and some drinking problems going on there in that scene in the bar coming up. So I think sin and the devil, the things that pull us away from God, right, are kind of at play here in the first act.
Yeah, and it's a lot of themes that take place in this. We get into kind of class warfare early on here too, of the haves and the have-nots. So as far as plot goes, we move on from there, and we see Zeke, who kind of Zeke and what's his name, Spunk, right? Zeke and his younger brother Spunk. They go into the city. They're now going to sell their cotton and kind of exchange it through the mill there, the processing center. They're going to get some money for that, and then they're faced. Well, at least Zeke is. Zeke gets the money, and now he's faced with what you said, sin. Sin is right there in front of his face. There is gambling happening. There is loud music happening. There is fast and easy women presented in front of him. And Zeke isn't shy about this, right? So when we get the characters, we'll talk about this a little bit. But Zeke, in a crowd full of people where we meet Chick, who ends up being played by Nina Mae McKinney, and she is the quote-unquote bad, right? Good versus evil, good and bad, devil, God, the whole thing. She would represent the devil in this situation. She's the one kind of luring him into the bar, saying, "Come with me. I'll show you a good time." This is where the movie kind of, I think, comes to an end of Act 1, because as they're in the bar, the next thing that kind of happens is Chick presents to Zeke an opportunity to make some fast money. So the $100 that the entire family just made over 6 months of work is now being put up for betting against a guy named Hot Shot, and potentially trying to turn $100 into $200. And you're right, you never trust a guy named Hot Shot. So what's happening here, though, is that Zeke doesn't know it, but he's being played, right? And he's being played by Hot Shot and by Chick, who do know each other, who have a relationship with each other. But Zeke is listening to this beautiful woman because he's so tempted. He's getting attention. And then ultimately, end of Act 1 is where Zeke loses all of his money because Chick and Hot Shot set him up. Hot Shot was playing with loaded dice, so it was rigged in his favor.
Yep.
Zeke's a little suspicious about this. Ultimately, ends up trying to. He presents that to Hot Shot, asking him, "Hey, are you playing with loaded dice?" They get into a confrontation. Zeke pulls out a knife. Hot Shot pulls out a gun. Everybody's in a frantic. Spunk, who's been looking for his brother this whole time, walks in the door of the bar. Gunshots go off. Ultimately, Zeke wins the war for the gun. Everybody scrambles. The bar clears, Zeke walks out of the bar, looking out, making sure that everybody knows that he has the gun, making sure everybody's gone. He walks back in and he hears sobbing. And ultimately, we find out that his brother, Spunk, has been shot. And ultimately, we will find out here in the next few scenes that he's been killed. And that I marked, I believe, that's where I had the end of Act 2. That's what I thought originally, right? There are a couple scenes that come to play. We get the funeral scene, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about plot, right? So do you believe what I just laid out to be the end of Act 1, or does Act 1 end with the repentance scene when he sees the angel in the sky as he's begging for forgiveness from his father, and his father tells him that an angel has come down to save him? Where are you at with the story there?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think scene one ends right there, in the bar, and then after that is where we start to mingle with scene two. So it feels pretty clear. It feels like a really clear cutoff point where we get all of that sin presented to us. Everything kind of unfolds. He kills his brother unintentionally, but kills him nonetheless. And then we're kind of stuck with this end of Act 1. Like, where do we go from here?
Well, where we go is we get in Act 2. And Act 2 presents itself like right away, like we talked about. He's now repented. And then we get the first time, maybe the second time, where we get actual title plates that show up on the screen, kind of like an old silent film. And that pushes us forward because now Ezekiel is become a minister, right? And he is now learned the error of his ways. He's brother Ezekiel. He doesn't, as a matter of fact, he's not Zeke no more, right? He's Ezekiel. Yeah. He is graduated in that form. So we do get to see character development here. And what's interesting, and we'll talk about it when we get to characters, is that this has been touted to be the first character development for an African American, at least on the United States movie screen. So that's pretty important when in the history of cinema, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unfortunate that the character development ends up not working out very well for him, at least, in theory, as we go along here. But I agree. That's pretty fascinating stuff.
So essentially what happens in Act 2, Will, is we get repented, learned the error of his ways Ezekiel now, who's now trying to share the wisdom of his failures and of the temptations back with the sinners of town by town by town as he jumps on the train, brings his family with him. They have a whole church service as they get to town by town by town. He is essentially trying to save as many sinners as he possibly can because he's learned the error of his ways. On that journey, Will, he is presented with the chick and Hot Shot again. They are clearly together. He learns that he was a part of a ruse the whole time. And there's a confrontation in the streets amongst Hot Shot and Chick. There's a confrontation in the streets where we get to see a backbone of Ezekiel and confronting Hot Shot through what he believes the strength of God now. He's got God on his side. So when we get to this point in the movie, there's really no secrets. You know what I mean? We kind of know everybody is who they are. But this is where things start to take a little bit of a change. And this is where I want to ask you, and maybe we should talk about it when we get to character development. I'll let you make the decision. But as far as the plot goes, Will, Hot Shot and Chick start going their separate ways. There's a scene where there's at the first sermon that Ezekiel is giving to the town that they're in. Chick shows up and she believes that she cannot be saved. And she presents that challenge to him. He starts spouting off at the mouth about, I'm going to get you in 3 stops. It's going to be faith. It's going to be obedience. And then finally, when you get to stop 3, repentance, you won't need to go to hell. You will no longer be on your journey to hell. You'll be on your path to righteousness and to heaven. And ultimately, he converts Chick in that moment to, by the end of Act 2, I'm jumping ahead. In that moment, this is what I want to ask. With Act 2 taking place, before we get to the baptism scene, is this another scheme by Chick for whatever reason? Is this genuine? She's trying to push the evil out of her and learn from the error of her ways. Because I know we're going to get there in Act 3 and what presents itself, but just at this point in the story, what do you believe is taking place?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any scheming going on here. I think she genuinely had some transformation happening. I think the problem with faith and belief in general is that you need to do a couple things other than just have faith and believe, right? It's also action, and I think it's every day, right? If you're going to be a faithful person, if you're going to believe in God and you're going to act in his name, it's an everyday process. And I think maybe that's, we're seeing day one, and we're seeing a couple of days along the way where Chick is willing to have faith and believe. But I think by, the end of the movie, she's not feeling it anymore, right? So I think that's how a lot of people operate. So I don't think she has to be scheming here necessarily. I think she's genuinely feeling the community around her as well. That's, regardless of whether or not you're religious, having a community around you like that in that moment when you're feeling like you're not a good person, but you're being accepted anyway, that's some strong stuff. So I think she's feeling it right there.
Okay, the reason I presented that, and I'm going to present you with another question when we get there, is
Okay.
as the movie goes on, I do think at the end of Act 2 and the beginning of Act 3, I think that's really the first time in this movie where I start questioning maybe direction. Maybe I start questioning character development. I start questioning certain things because I'm with you. I think maybe, and I'm sure the audience that's listening is with us to this point. I believe she's authentically and genuinely trying to be saved. And I conclude at the end the same thing, that she wanted to be saved. This is kind of like a between Zeke and Chick. This is like a back and forth cat and mouse game, right? They both are enthralled by the other side. To me, I wrote down whose dice game is more enticing. All right. And it's Zeke and his religion and good, right? Versus Chick and her gambling and dancing and sinning and the whole thing, the temptation, right? Whose dice game is more enticing? What ends up happening as Chick is getting baptized is, once again, I truly believe in that moment she is accepting, but because she's pure, because she wants to stay that way, she's still putting this responsibility on Brother Ezekiel to keep her that way. And he feels, in my opinion, maybe you've seen it differently, he feels like he needs to somehow either protect her, or I don't even know if that's the right way. Maybe I don't see it as protecting. He's just, once again, he's enticed by her beauty. And in a very almost weird scene by today's standards, he carries her out of the water. And as soon as she becomes as pure as it gets, right, for the second time, he's already ready to hop on her bones, basically. He takes her into the tent and he starts kissing on her right away, which there's a lot of themes that can be talked about there. But if not for his own mother, who follows him into the tent and stops him from sinning, who knows how far that scene would have gone. So ultimately, we're once again being faced where Ezekiel is no longer just saved. He is every day, like you said, he's being faced with temptation. So this, at the end of Act 2, what essentially ends up happening is the next scene after this is Mammy in the kitchen with Missy Rose. She is cooking dinner, and Ezekiel comes in. He's worried and bothered. Missy Rose asks him what's going on. He says, I don't know. The devil is just back at me again. He's coming for me. I think I can solve it if you and I get married. And of course, Missy is just enthralled by him. She says yes, and now they're engaged. So that's sort of what's happening. Now, we're not at the end of Act 2 yet, right? Because something happens in the next scene. The next scene is they're at another sermon. And now Ezekiel is presenting another sermon to the masses. And this is when Chick shows back up again. And she is, doing the African-American culture church thing, at least during that time, the way it's being presented to us. They're speaking in tongues. Everybody is citing and chanting and singing and dancing. And she goes up and she grabs Ezekiel at this point, and there's basically a right away a temptation. He's forgotten all about Missy Rose. In this scene, man, you talk about camera work, you talk about
Mm-hmm.
director choices. This is my favorite scene in the movie,
Yeah,
just with as far as the way it's shot, right? And we'll
for
get
sure.
there a little bit more, but are you with me? Did that not stand out? Just some of the images in this scene?
This is a great scene. Something I'll be thinking about for a while because I mean, this is a not the first time, but the way he uses lighting here, especially in that transition from you know Ezekiel in a good pure place out into the darkness of the wilderness of
Oh yeah.
temptation. It was good stuff. No, this is a great scene.
Well, the way the scene ends, Will, is ultimately what happens is Chick is walking out and leading Zeke outside of the sermon, even though everybody else is still kind of celebrating and doing their thing. He leaves the sermon and he walks out to chase after her because he cannot be without her any longer. They have now accepted each other, their love. They're going to come together. And ultimately, what ends up happening is Missy Rose gets left behind. She walks out of the church trying to find them, and she cannot find them. Basically, begins to go back into the church and wails about Zeke being gone. And for whatever reason, the entire community or parish starts wailing with her. Maybe because they've lost their prophet, they believe. I don't know.
Mm,
But that's where I have end of Act 2.
for sure. Nope. Right on board with you there.
Okay. At this
Yeah.
point, we're still believing Chick to be trying to achieve good. Okay. My issue here is at the beginning of Act 3, Will, now we have Zeke, who's no longer the chosen one, no longer the repented minister. He
Mm-hmm.
has now he's just a normal, everyday sinning citizen, right? Not to the bad degree. He's just chosen a life of love, and he's going to try to pursue the domesticated lifestyle, right? The more
Sure.
traditional way of living. He goes to a job. He works at a mill. And then the very first scene after that, we see Hotshot in Zeke's home, sitting with Chick, and they share a kiss, and they've been plotting and planning, and this is like the next scene. So in real
Yeah.
time on the movie, I don't know in real time, but as far as like in real time in the movie, maybe 5 minutes has gone by, and we've already went from them really being ready to accept their love to it's already being backstabbed by
Yeah.
Chick. So my question to you is still, do you believe that she was still battling, trying to be good, but because it's in her blood, as Hotshot would say, she just can't escape it? Or have we been fooled like Zeke's been fooled this whole time?
No, I think I mean one of the things that he says Hotshot says in this scene is like I've looked everywhere for you. I've been looking for you forever, something like that along those lines. So I don't think they've been plotting something. I think that they've just, Hotshot found her and maybe at this point in, the romance she's decided she no longer wants to be with Zeke. But something happened in this time frame to change her mind about what she wanted. I think it's a flaw with the movie because we don't know how long it's been. We don't know. You think there would be something that incited this, not just 5 minutes later in movie time, all of a sudden she's back to wanting to be with Hotshot. But yeah, I definitely think there's something, maybe part of this right here could be some of that influence that the studio might have had on what Vidor was trying to do. Because if he's trying to say something maybe a little bit more serious about Black culture and isn't allowed to, then maybe this is kind of one of those points where he didn't have a lot of control. Also, just hypothesizing, don't have any research that would suggest that, but just an idea. So.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I could reach or try to connect it to, right, because you're trying to make it all make sense as a rational thinker, is, maybe she thought that they would achieve more or she would have more rather than just this little, you know, 600 square foot shed that they seem to be living in that has 2 rooms, a bedroom, and a kitchen slash dining slash living slash whatever room, right?
Mhm.
So I thought maybe we just came back to the class warfare a little bit. I don't know that I'm right there, but that's kind of what I did to make sense of it.
Yeah.
As I think, to argue against my own question, if it wasn't for the scene in the second act where Chick and Hot Shot get into a fight because she is on her way to righteousness, that scene I think is needed because it shows that she's pure and trying to maintain that way, right? Without that scene, everything else could really come off as a ploy. So I think you're right. I think she's authentic throughout the whole thing. It's just it happens so fast, the turn, that, it always feels like these movies, the third act kind of falls a little bit short because it needs a few more things. But maybe that's because he had a 10-minute chase scene in the swamp set up in his mind. Who knows? We move on. So essentially what ends up happening is this third act is relatively quick compared to the other two. We get Zeke, who comes home from work. He starts being suspicious of Chick and what she's been doing while he's been gone. He's looking around the room, looking around the two bedrooms there. He can't find anything. Asks if she's doing right by him. She states that she is. She decides that she's going to, basically start singing him to sleep because he's had a long day, telling him to stop thinking. And as soon as he falls asleep at the kitchen table, she's in the bedroom, packing a bag, ready to jump out the window because there is Hot Shot with a horse and carriage, ready to take her to whatever temptation is ahead of them. Ultimately, she gets out the window. She gets into the horse and carriage, and Zeke wakes up, starts being suspicious again, grabs a gun, goes out the window, and sees them riding off into not the sunset, into the nighttime, and starts firing off shots, trying to, I believe, kill Hot Shot. And now the chase is on. And ladies and gentlemen, we have an Usain Bolt here. They're off in a horse and carriage, and they're off to the races, and somehow Zeke is able to keep up as best as he possibly can. To wrap this movie up, Will, the horse carriage ends up, basically, the wheel comes off. It sends Chick a-flying. Hot Shot continues on down the road with whatever horse or however far the horse carriage can continue to go, but that allows Zeke time to get to a beaten and battered and a broken Chick who now is laying in the mud. I thought this was interesting. When she was baptized, she was in the water, clean, and now she's dirty again. She's back in the mud. I thought that was kind of a cool contrast, whether it was done on purpose or not. Who knows? But she ultimately ends up... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I definitely think it's intentional here. But that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, ultimately what ends up happening here to wrap up the plot, Will, is just she ends up dying. And as they were sitting there talking to each other, she apologizes for not being the woman that she wanted to be. And that ultimately leads to Hot Shot coming back and asking if she's dead. And Zeke now chasing to get revenge against her. And this leads to what we've already talked about, this beautiful kind of sequence where they're in the, New Orleans, Arkansas, Alabama swamp somewhere. And there's a chase scene, and ultimately he gets his hands on Hot Shot, kills him, sends him to prison where he does time. The next scene, you see him picking an axe pick and does his time. And then after that, he's on probation, gets to go home with his family. And our final shot goes back to one of the original shots. I think it's the only duplicate shot in the entire movie, which is just him back home with his family, who are very accepting, even Missy Rose, who is glad to have him back. So along this journey, Zeke has killed 2 people. 2 people, but he's still living and breathing with his family wherever they live and breathe. Well, that's the story. Not my best effort at it. I'll get better as we go.
You did great.
What do you take away from the story?
Yeah. Oh man. Going here already, huh? No.
Just thoughts on the way the story arc and the way did everything mesh and match?
No. So I think earlier I mentioned the messy. This is what I was kind of getting at here was that transition into the third act where you could tell that there's he's there's some thematic elements occurring here that he's trying to make work, but I don't think he can quite all the way get there. And it's kind of this the tension that's palpable throughout the whole thing is that tension between God and nature, right? Like
Yes.
what do our bodies desire, but what does our soul need, right? And
Yes.
that's kind of the tension that's kind of running throughout the story here. And I really think it's fascinating, and why I said that scene was intentional. Her being in the mud, because she says something about being broken and split in two, or broken and pulled apart in two, and that's kind of how we operate as humans. Like, we're always constantly like talking about talking to ourselves about, like, hey, this is what I should do, but this is what I want. And, like, punishing ourselves for wanting something when we feel like we shouldn't desire it. And as far as the story goes, I thought he was doing a really good job with kind of that theme throughout the movie, but it kind of just felt a little off in that last act, mostly because I don't know if he brings it all the way home, just because of the way Zeke kind of gets kind of a happy ending. I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like maybe it should have ended with him in jail, but
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? Although during that time, I'm trying to think who in the hell would even know that Hot Shot has been, killed, and who would know how it happened and whatnot. But we just take the story for, I think it's that moment, right, where I realized that this is a movie about religion, right?
yeah,
This is a movie about religion versus nature, like you just said. It is that. It is the two, the two brains of the human, and it's in that constant battle about like short term gain of joy versus the long term, where do you fall in the long term scope of things. So
yeah.
if it wasn't for, I think, that scene, I don't know. I'm left asking what the main theme of this is, and maybe we should dive into themes right now. Ultimately,
Yeah.
where do you believe the director is going with this story? I tend to believe the way I concluded my final thoughts were is it's a constant battle of good versus evil. Um, and if you are too curious about the temptations, you know, there are consequences that come with
Yeah.
those temptations, and we see that throughout this whole thing. Um, I don't know where the home part of it comes in, where he gets that happy ending at the end of it. I would have almost rather you've been right. Like, he ends up in prison, and the story there would feel more about religion, right?
Mm.
Rather than what this other message is he's trying to tell.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a good point. I was trying to think of, like, a way to. I'm losing my train of thought here a little bit, but no, I think really what's happening throughout the movie for me, and why I was trying to give Vidor a little bit more credit here, because I think this story can translate to more than just the a black community, right? I think it kind of is trying to say something about humanness, and humanity. I think mostly about men, and our sometimes our inability to control our impulses in situations, especially around sexuality. But I think I don't know. I think what he's trying to do here is he's really trying to pin that the things that we desire, our nature, the things, we're drawn to gambling, we're drawn to sex, we're drawn to, doing things that aren't necessarily in the light of God, right? I think he's trying to say, like, all of these things, we have a tendency towards, and I don't know if we can escape them. When, he's always kind of showing the community, and all the scenes with the church and the community are all in light, right? There's always a bright light. There's always, everyone's in ecstasy when they're together. So I think he's trying to say something like, this is what we should be doing, but this is what we're drawn towards. And it just seems Just seems like I think that's where he was trying to go, but I don't think he could get there in the end because of the way this ended. But
Okay. No, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's ultimately both. I mean, the thing that we're seeing is a story of religion, but it is the internal conflict of the human being. It's the,
yeah,
you know, it's both. It's I'm horny, and this there's only one thing that's going to make this go away. In a time frame like that, 19 whatever, your options are your adopted sister apparently, or no, I'm serious. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
that's the way it's being
yep.
presented, or being overly aggressive with whatever woman is in the city and trying to take possession of her, and be the first one to do it and be the strongest one to do it and the most, you know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like a dog pissing, look what I've done.
Yes.
That's essentially what it is, right? Um, yeah, the whole thing. Yeah, I think you're ultimately right. I think that might be the main message of what's trying to be said here.
Yeah.
I get confused with the final, because he does lay out with every temptation that is followed in this movie. There is a clear consequence that comes from it, right? There is a clear consequence. And those that stick to their path, like the family, they're just
Yeah.
on the straight and narrow, right? There's no ups, there's no downs, I guess. It's constantly here. So I guess it's, where do you want life to be? Do you want it to be a constant timeline of this? Or do you want it to be up here sometimes, which will ultimately mean you're down here sometimes? I mean, I
Yeah.
maybe that's an oversimplification of something, but that's kind of how it feels here. So
No, I think you're right. Um, no, I think you're right. I just my the thing that I worry about with this movie, I think, I think there's probably some justification here for my worry, is that what he's saying is about black men and black communities, and like, hey, you guys are better off. Like, he's making a kind of a moral stance here about a community that he doesn't belong to. um, and he's saying like, hey, you guys should do this because you guys are better when you do this, but this is what you really are. And it feels, I don't know if that's what he's doing. It kind of feels like there's some of that underlying the whole movie, which makes me feel a little, maybe not as warm to this movie as I was when I first finished. But yeah, I mean, that's why I keep coming back to like, hey, this is about humans, because I think it can be, but I don't know if that's what he's saying. That I think that's my biggest worry about the movie.
give me an example of why you would feel that way. Like where would you get a sense that this is being more directed? I mean, other than being a black cast, right? Where would you get a sense that this is what only black men are doing, or only black males are thinking? Like, where would you get that sense? Because I'm not sure I picked up on that.
Yeah, well, I think it is because it's just a black cast, right? And it's a white man making a movie about a black community. And I, like I said earlier, I'm comfortable with that. I I think you should be allowed to tell the stories you want to tell, but when there's something, I don't want to say sinister, but when there's something underlying it that can, be problematic, then you got to be careful. And I don't know if he's careful enough here to say like, because we don't, there's not a single white person in this. So even the people that are, even the prison guards that are watching over the chain gang, like
Yeah, they're all.
they're black. So
Yeah,
that's where it gets a little. I guess why I'm kind of waffling is because I don't know, but it feels like there could be
I mean,
some yeah,
if I could play what Will does a lot of the times is devil's advocate, right? If I could
yeah,
play the devil's advocate for a second, this to me just feels like maybe um, um, a situation where, because we know more information, hence the director is white, maybe we're trying to connect things to it. I don't know if you remove that, if you're sitting in this film watching that without knowing that it's a white director, if there's anything that really, kind of points to that thought, right?
hmm,
I think we're privileged with knowing a little bit more, so we're making that connection, and we're wanting to make sure that we're not fully liking the movie and missing this point. I think it's fair to just come away with that conclusion that this black, white, anything in between. I'm not black, but I still picked up on those themes. It makes me reflect on shitty situations that I put myself in because of my temptations or sin,
Yeah.
right? So that would be my only point is that I think we're maybe privileged to a little bit more information than maybe the average moviegoer would have known watching it otherwise.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point. I don't want to push on it too much because I feel like I'm drawing on just a little bit of information about Vidor that I've, researched in the last 24 hours. So
Sure. Fair enough. No, fair
a little
enough.
bit more before I go any farther than that. So
Fair
just
enough,
want to
man.
put a flag up and say maybe.
Well, it's there, buddy. It's on the field. We'll leave it up to the audience to tell us what they think. I want to talk a little bit about Daniel Haynes, the guy that played Zeke.
Yeah.
Was it a perfect performance? No. By the standards of 1929 acting, I thought he did a hell of a job for someone. You got to think about pressure of being the main lead in an all African American cast, and
Yeah.
that is going to be for both black audiences and white audiences, and have people walk out of there and say, thinking that he did a good job. And the reception, from what I read, was that Daniel Haynes and critics alike, both the public and the critics, thought that this was a hell of a job done by him. What were your thoughts on his performance throughout it? He's got a hell of a presence, right?
For sure. No, I thought he was really good. I think there's a something about this time where the acting's a little bit more, I don't want to say wooden, but scripted.
Interesting
like
word. Interesting word.
You can feel the script, right? You can kind of feel them processing the words. It doesn't feel as natural as something that we would call good acting today. But, I think there's still some really good moments along the way. They find some real transcendent moments for him in this movie, especially like in that last scene, the chase scene. So,
I think the best acting moments that we've seen so far, if I'm being honest, is when they're stoic, right? And the camera just settles in on their face and they're just doing a facial expression. I haven't seen too many people deliver a dialogue with the type of real, authentic feeling that you would have in that situation. Even when Spunk died, right? His brother just died and he's the cause of it. He's the one that shot the gun. You would think, and I think they try to mask it because he goes back out into the street to try to see if anybody can help him. And I think that's probably a good call, especially during that time, with acting not being at the level it is today, him pleading his case, trying to find someone to come back in. But when he originally knows it's Spunk, there's like a millennial pause, as they would call it, where he's looking at him. Clearly we, the audience, know it's Spunk. He has to know it's Spunk. And then he's like, Spunk? Like, it just, it's too late. Again, I'm not going to hold his feet to the fire because I haven't done the research on what his acting career had been like at this point. Sure. But in those stoic moments, when I think about Anita Page in Blackmail, when I think about, it's slipping me, A Passion of the
Joan
of Arc, when I think about her, those are the best moments of acting that we've seen so far. I'd be curious to see when we start getting that next level. Am I missing anything? Do you think there's been a kind of a superb level of acting in anything we've seen so far?
No, I think what you made me realize is that we're when it comes to dialogue is when we're having issues right now, because some of the Charlie Chaplin in The Circus, I couldn't find any flaws with his performance because he didn't have to worry about him doing any dialogue. That was a silent one. So I think that's probably what's going on here is we're so early in this kind of the field, right? Of talkie that they're not quite there yet. They're not quite sure how they're supposed to, these first few years are just practice. They're building towards something. So.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Just a little note, Nina Mae McKinney, just give me your thoughts on, she played Chick, and they're the two 1A and 1B of this movie. Yeah. You could give Fanny Bell DeKnight, who played Mammy, you could kind of give her, I would say she had third billing with most screen time after this. But as far as Nina Mae McKinney, the lady that played Chick, talk about her character, or
Sure.
maybe what could have saved, like what character developments needed to be done with any of these characters that maybe would have made this movie go from a 3.35 to the 4 or 5 range. Like what needed to be done?
Yeah, so I think you hit on it earlier when you kind of identified that transition into the third act where we don't quite understand like the time frame. We don't understand how long she's been kind of wanting to get out of the relationship with Zeke. If it's something that all of a sudden is just happening, there's just not enough information there. So maybe if we had a couple more scenes in that beginning of the third act to kind of show like why she's falling back out of her religious fervor. That would give us a little bit more information about her character. I think she did just fine. I think she's a better actor than she is dancer. I'll say that much.
Dude, I'm so
That
glad you
scene
said
with her
that.
dancing at the beginning, God, that was awful.
Dude, it was awful. And you know what's interesting? I was like watching, there was a shot in the bar scene that I thought, Vidor does a good job of kind of progressing the story and also sharing the culture with us, where, you
Mhm.
know, she starts going over, she's done dancing and she goes over to to Zeke, and now they're kind of kissing on each other, and we're kind of seeing how their relationship is progressing. All while there's men that come into frame and they start dancing. I've
Mhm.
learned of a new dance style called trucking that took place twice throughout this movie. If you remember, after he gets his money, he is standing and in like walking in place.
Yep.
That's called trucking. I didn't know that
Okay.
existed. It's where you continue to the kind of like you're doing motion without actually moving, um,
Yeah.
which was like a infamous dance style back then. I just think it's
Okay.
incredible that like I've been on this earth 37 years. I've seen multiple types of things, and there's still dances out there that I haven't seen. Like you can only contort the body so many different ways, and it's just
That's right.
amazing that we can come up with new different styles of dancing that we've never seen
Yeah.
before. So hats off to
Just
human beings.
one of those fads you'll see in a couple years on YouTube or TikTok where people are putting modern music over
Yeah,
the dance.
yeah. Over on TikTok, the next trend is going to be chick from from Hallelujah and how to dance like her. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that was. Anything else you want to touch on when it comes to characters or the casting and the way the acting went down? I think we kind of touched on the acting performances here. That they're as good as they can be for this time period.
Yeah. No, the family dynamics were fun in that first couple of scenes. They just seemed to really love each other and to have a good time together. And I thought that everything was, I thought that was real fun when everyone was dancing around and stuff. So
Yeah, and the
it was just
kids all
it's a
know
good
tap dancing, and yeah, yeah.
just a fun couple scenes there. But besides that, I didn't have anything else.
Well, let's talk direction. Let's talk about some of the things that we seen Vidor give us,
Yeah.
or Vidor. How did you feel that the story was told um, from his perspective, like the choices that he made?
Yeah, no, I thought it was excellent. Honestly, just the different uses he had, not just like his direction of the characters, but the way he used lighting and the way that the music played a really profound part of this movie as well. Um, uh, just the way he kind of depicted the community versus the kind of isolation of I don't necessarily agree with this, but he did a good job of putting the community in everyone being in ecstasy together versus the ecstasy of the sin, right?
Yes,
So I thought
yes.
there were some really good transitions or juxtapositions there. So overall, I think he did a great job. Outside of those last couple scenes where I just don't necessarily think he thought it all the way through.
Yeah, I'm with you. I want to talk about three things he did in particular, right? Well, we've already talked about the last one, which was just the way he shot the kind of the chase scene through the swamp, right? I thought that was beautifully done. I want to talk about two other ones that were just I like the way he told the story. The first one was while Zeke and Spunk get to the cotton processing plant, right?
Yeah.
There's a group of guys that come up and he starts singing at the end of the road, right? and everybody kind of goes around him. Well, while he's singing At the End of the Road, they're showing all the workers in the cotton processing station doing their job. So like instead of just it being on him singing, which is what we would normally get, we get this great montage of like what's happening behind the scenes with the cotton processing plant there. So I thought that was kind of cool and well done.
Yeah.
And then we've alluded to it already, but just the specific shots in the church, the second sermon that he gives where Chick comes back and they ultimately decide to fall in love with each other, is so many incredible shots here. The close-ups of both of their faces, but not just once. He kind of goes back and forth to him, right? Mm-hmm. Then there's this great shot of this woman, hysterical woman, running out of the church and the men throwing water on her face because they got to calm her down. Even to the extent of tongues in that time, there was a limit, right? Like, chill out, lady. You know what I mean? So there was some comedy done throughout this movie. And then finally, the one that I just remember the most is him ultimately watching her walk out of the church. And instead of it just being his full body and frame, right, we get people walking in front of him, but he's so tall above them that he sticks out, and he's just beelining it with his eyes on him. I just thought those three specific choices were really incredible. And for some of the flaws, I ultimately think this movie is perfectly fine. I think I enjoyed it. I would watch it again. There's something to study there. And I think a lot of it's because of the direction. You can tell that he's done this before. So
No, absolutely agree.
The last thing I would say is we talked about, is there anything you wanted to touch on as far as creative factors, or we talked on the soundtrack and how important that was being a musical. Anything else that stood out to you?
Not that I can think of. I think we touched on a lot of what drew me to this movie. We got my fix of religion talking out, and I'm good to go.
Did you want to answer my question about whose dice game is more enticing? Is it fair to call what Ezekiel is trying to present to Chick as his version of the dice game?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think. Yeah, I mean, one thing that's interesting that we really didn't touch on is Ezekiel using the religion and his brother Ezekiel to kind of get away from what he did, rather than, instead of coming into the Lord's light, he's using it as a shield from what he did. I'm kind of interested in that idea too. But yeah,
I think if this movie's made 40 years later, I don't know exactly when, but if this movie's made later, we have to dissect into that. Like, we could not let that slip anymore, right? We're giving the time period the benefit of the doubt, and we're allowing King Vidor to say that this is the message of the movie. These are the themes. We're not exploring how he just happens to kill his brother. The family is so happy to just let him be back. He repents all in the same night as the funeral. There's no real dissection there. And it really, with a contemporary brain and thought, it's like, man, what a gross display of using religion as a cop-out to ultimately forgive yourself to get to the next thing. I'm not saying you can't get there in the long run, but like, we need a story that helps us get there, that connects it a lot more than just an angel coming down from the clouds. But that kind of also tells you where maybe religion was at, and where people were at, and where, kind of deep thinkers were at that time, and maybe in an African-American community where there's not a lot of education at that time, everything is taken for what is being said. So I don't think it's fair for us to kind of dissect those points right now, but I do think if it's made later, if it's remade today, we could not let that slip, right?
Right. Nope. That's right.
Okay. Anything else with the movie? Final thoughts and ratings, Will. Give me your final thoughts and what you rated this on Letterboxd.
Yeah, no, I gave it I'm probably going to give it a 3.5. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on here. I just can't quite get on board with the third act. And I think maybe when we get to hard hitting questions, you'll understand why, because I got one for you today.
Oh, great.
But yeah, no. I think this is a really good a really good movie to watch if you want to study how to be a good director, because I think he's doing a lot of things that are pretty phenomenal. As far as story goes, I think he's just got some stuff to clean up. But
Well, that leads me into the final 5 questions. You've answered one of them about what would be your reason to watch this movie.
yeah.
Should this movie have been drafted?
Yes.
Is
Yeah, I
this
think so.
is this movie a rewatchable?
Yeah, I think so. If you really want to dig into King Vidor, because it sounds like, reading his IMDb, he becomes kind of an important figure over the next decade in Hollywood. So yeah, I definitely think it's something to rewatch.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Is this a masterpiece?
No.
Agreed. And then finally, I'm going to steal one from our friends Bill Simmons and them at the Rewatchables, because I do like this one a lot. Who won the movie? Is this Vidor? Is this King Vidor or Vidor? Did he win the movie?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, knowing at least a little bit of what comes next for his career, I think he probably ends up winning this movie.
Does that suck to say, as a white man choosing the only white person a part of the movie? Or is it just a fair analysis of it? Because, I'm just trying to have a little sense of awareness, because I do think Daniel Haynes was the next obvious choice, not just because he's the lead, but because, dude, I think if that guy had, acting lessons or had people working with him, and maybe we'll get to some of his later films, maybe he does get better, but he reminds me of like a young, Lee Jones, Tommy Lee Jones, not Tommy Lee Jones, but the guy from Darth Vader's voice. Who am I?
James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones. He reminds me of like a young James Earl Jones with that presence and that type of deep voice. And I feel like there could have been something there with him. So, is that fair to say, giving it to a white man?
Well, I mean, it can both suck and be true.
I like that answer. Okay, we agree. Well, hard-hitting questions before we move on to our penultimate movie. You want to go first, or you want mine?
You go first.
Okay, I only have one.
Oh, okay.
And
I wonder if it's the same one.
Basically, I just want to know, what year was masturbation invented?
When did we domesticate animals?
Okay, touche.
It's been a long time, I bet, my friend.
Would masturbation have solved all the problems in this movie?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just go out in the dark, my friend. Come back in 5 minutes. You'll be fine.
I'm not sure I've ever seen a hornier character on screen in my life, but that's okay. We move on.
All right. Well, my hard-hitting question for you is, was Ezekiel in jail for 12 days? Because those kids are the same exact age as they were at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, none of them aged, right? He repented, somehow became an ordained minister, learned all of the Bible, right? Which he probably knew a lot of the Bible. Let's be fair. Sure. I'm sure those were read, but he not only did he repent, he's now able to give the knowledge. I don't think he got married to her, but he fell in love with. Do you think they were married? They weren't married, right?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. But all within 12 days. This whole thing probably took place over like 17 hours.
Yeah. 1929 time.
Yeah, goes back to our dancing daughters. Remember, we were unsure of the timeline there. Exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the 1929 movie Hallelujah. We hope you enjoyed that. Let's set up, Will, if we can, our penultimate movie, which I believe is Diary of a Lost Girl. And I believe the next 2 films, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the next 2 films are your last 2 draft picks, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And if I'm remembering correct, they're both foreign. One is German, and the other one, well, I think they might both be German.
Well, but the next one definitely is. The next one, Diary of a Lost Girl, is a 1929 German silent film, which is directed by G.W. Pabst.
All right.
But it
Yeah.
does have an American star in it named Louise Brooks. So that's an interesting note.
Yeah. 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 So definitely excited about this one. It looks like we're going to get some 1929 take on some themes that have become pretty relevant over the last handful of years for us, especially around women's rights. So I'm interested to see some of the parallels and some of the maybe not parallels that are present in this movie. So
Yeah, just to give kind of a tagline, after falling pregnant by a pharmacist and refusing to marry, a young woman is ejected from her home and sent to a strict girls' reform school. So talk about right off just that tagline alone. There's like 2 or 3 issues with women's autonomy, right?
yeah,
Um,
yep.
and in just the paternity or patriarch society type thing too. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch this one. We are covering a lot of, I think, a wide scope of range on the spectrum of issues. And yeah, this was on my list. If you wouldn't have drafted this one would have been on mine, I think. So, or no, that would have been the next one, Escape from Dartmoor. That was the next one.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
excited to see this one. Any other thoughts before we say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, if you are looking to watch this along with us, you can rent it. It looks like pretty much any place that you can rent movies. You could also stream it for free on Canopy. If you have a library card or a library subscription, you can subscribe to Canopy for free. So it's a pretty neat little app. It's got a lot of independent films, and it looks like it's available there. So go get
Yeah,
yourself a library card.
we're gonna have to reach out to them and see if we can't get a sponsor of some sort.
Yeah, Canopy, hook us up.
Hey, come on now. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Do us all a favor. Keep watching movies. Get yourself some popcorn. See you at the theaters.
All right, we'll see you.